As Republican members of Congress try to turn the page to tax reform, its members are facing growing opposition from grassroots political organizations. One group in particular is making its voice heard. Indivisible, what began as an online guidebook to resisting the Trump administration, has now given rise to a movement that's being noticed all over Washington. Joining me from Washington is Angel Padilla, board secretary for Indivisible. Angel, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about background first. As I understand it, Indivisible began with a Google document. Tell me more about that.
Sure. I mean, this really did become, it started as a Google document. Back in December, we put out a document. It was basically how to resist the Trump agenda. It was a Google document that quickly crashed because we had so many visitors. And luckily, because of the attention, we had a lot of people who came forward and said, hey, can we make this into something nice? Now it's a 26-page document with all the grammatical errors have been fixed. But really, this is all sort of the result of the election. After the election, we were all feeling upset, obviously, because it was an outcome we didn't expect, and we were afraid about how this might harm communities. We were really afraid about how this might affect people's health care. We've been hearing for years about how this would, that Republicans would take away people's health care. We were worried about immigrants because that was such a huge platform from the Trump campaign, and so we got together, former congressional staffers, and we put together this guide that basically lays out, how you can resist. It's modeled after the Tea Party, and it basically has two fundamental premises. One is if you act locally, if you get together with your friends and you act locally, you can make a difference. You can push back on the Trump agenda. We saw it with the Tea Party, and we wanted to basically emulate it, but devoid of all the really nastiness that we saw from the Tea Party. The other thing is that if we, if you take a position of defense, we can be more effective, right? We can be a bigger tent if our position is we will resist. We don't have the power in Congress, so we can't set the agenda, but we can resist at every turn. And so if we act locally and we're defensive, we can really stop the Trump agenda.
And so I think you just answered the question, but is that essentially the overarching mission, to oppose the Trump presidency? And is there a set of ideological values that corresponds with? Are you Democrats then that are who are opposing this president?
So we are completely nonpartisan. We don't, we're a progressive group, and we want to see members of Congress take progressive votes. So we don't favor one party or the other. We put pressure on Democrats as much as we do on Republicans. The bottom line is, it's not about saying no for saying no's sake. It's really about trying to protect communities. When Donald Trump was elected, we immediately became concerned about whether he was going to take people's health care, which we saw right out of the gate. That's the first thing he tried to do. We were worried about immigrant communities and refugees, and that's another thing that he did right out of the gate. So it's not about saying no, it's about protecting communities, and we think that the best way of doing that, the way that we can be most effective, is by taking a defensive position, saying no and resisting whenever we can.
And do you have a way to tell how big Indivisible is right now? I mean, you talk about this being a 26-page Google document, sort of a manual that is composed of these insights gleaned from experience that you all have as former congressional staffers. But do you have a way to quantify how many people are part of your group?
Yeah, it's incredible. So we have now over 6,000 groups around the country. We have at least 2 in every congressional district. And we have an average of 13 in every congressional district. So we're pretty widespread. We have good representation all over the country, and some of these groups range from 5 or 6 people that get together in the living room once a week, and some of these groups are literally 2,000 people who meet regularly to talk about what they can do to resist.
And so you outlined some of your concerns. You talked about protecting communities, but give me your list of top 3, top 4 issues that are primarily your focus right now.
Sure. And so, we had a big win on Friday. That was probably, we thought that protecting the ACA was one of our top concerns. And for good reason. We saw a ton of people come out during the February recess to talk about how much they wanted to keep their health care, because it was a big deal. It was a huge deal. And as a result of Friday's vote, 24 million people are going to keep their health care. But what's important is that the fight isn't over. Members of Congress and Republicans are not giving up. We really need people to give direct feedback to members to make sure that healthcare is not still on the table. Other issues that are incredibly important to us, the Supreme Court nomination, Neil Gorsuch is an extreme candidate, and we don't want to see him take a seat at the Supreme Court. We also don't want Trump to fund his deportation force. He really wants to see he wants to basically deport as many people as he can, and he's trying to fund things like the border wall, but also internal enforcement. Those are top concerns for us. And of course, there's also the Russia ties to the administration, the Trump taxes. These are all things that the American public want to know and are interested in talking to the members about.
You talk about health care. The president has signaled after that defeat that the Republican House bill faced last week that he's now open to working with Democrats. What do you think about that?
So I can't imagine any replacement bill that didn't do harm to communities. I mean, if right out of the gate they're trying to take away healthcare for 24 million people, I can't imagine what kind of negotiations they're trying to do. The bottom line, it's a huge blow to the Trump agenda on Friday. This was their signature. This is a signature, policy priority for the Republicans for the last 7 years, and they couldn't do it. This basically indicates that Trump doesn't have a plan. He's not the deal maker that he wants to pretend he is. And they've got no solutions. So if I were, I would not imagine, I can't imagine a progressive bill coming out of that White House.
But if there are some Democrats that say, there are some fixes that we could perhaps work together with the White House in making, what would your group's reaction be?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, if there are actually good fixes that they want to talk about, then they should. I don't see that happening. Right, when the priority is to dismantle it, to take people's health care away. But if we truly had a progressive proposal out there, I mean, we wouldn't oppose it. I mean, we are a progressive group.
So you mentioned also Judge Neil Gorsuch. What is it that you expect to see realistically from Democrats with regards to Neil Gorsuch?
Democrats need to oppose, and it's not enough to say that they're going to vote against Neil Gorsuch. They need to vote against cloture. There's a reason why we have a filibuster. It's to prevent extreme candidates, to prevent extreme justices from getting onto the court. And if Democrats vote yes for the cloture, but no on Gorsuch, that's not good enough. They need to prevent it from going to
break that down for us a little bit, just to be clear here. What you're saying is that anything short of a filibuster for Democrats, you think is unacceptable.
Yes, they need to oppose at every turn. So it's not just that final no vote, it's also opposing the cloture vote, which is the parliamentary procedure that precedes an actual vote on the nominee.
All right, Angel Padilla, board secretary at Indivisible, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
All right, thanks for having me.